certainly take it with me. But so far, from what I've read, it's people who produce the clothes. So anything to add there, you're welcome.
Yeah, I can add that it's really the 2024 amendment to the waste directive, which addresses the export of plastic waste, that I suggested in my comment might capture synthetic clothing and help control that flow. But that's a separate legal instrument from the deal that we discussed earlier on extended producer responsibility. There are provisions in the export regime that prevent or bar the mixing of different types of waste. So there's an issue in countries that are importing secondhand clothing that sometimes it's smuggled in, mixed with other things, and disguised. It escapes tariffs, and there are a lot of tricks in the waste export business. It's a dirty business in many ways, and so there are regulations that the EU have adopted that discourage this kind of mixing and disguising and fraudulent export. I want to also mention that although there is a ban on this type of export coming up, there are countries have the option of applying for exemptions so they can continue to import waste. And to do that, they have to demonstrate that they can soundly manage the waste, which for many countries is a very tall order. I mean, it has to be done to the standards of the EU in their country. And that's precisely what almost no countries have. So I would look very, very carefully at any country that applies for an exemption, because there'll be a temptation to grant exemptions even when they cannot demonstrate they can responsibly manage the waste stream. Thank you. And if there's time, I had one other comment that's unrelated to the question, but
yes, please go ahead.
The earlier discussion, and at different times we've touched on consumers and their role in this. I don't think we've said yet that it was no accident that synthetic materials overtook natural materials. There were concerted campaigns, and these were cultural campaigns. I very much appreciate Leanne's discussion of influencers and celebrities and movie stars, because that's exactly part of the teams that were put together by companies like Monsanto, which sponsored plastics and fashion displays at Disneyland in 1965 and 1966, that hired high-end designers, including designers who worked for the wives of American presidents, to design clothing using polyester and to sell to the public synthetic material. And that didn't start in 1960 or 1980 or 1999. It started in the 1930s. It started with nylon. So there has been, wave upon wave of media publicity, advertisement campaigns, very, very well thought out, highly funded, using very high-end people, who became the spokespersons, the goodwill ambassadors for synthetic material. And that's a big part of the story of how the culture was swung away from natural materials. Very explicit language. I'll share some of that later with some of you, but I researched a little bit of this. I actually grew up next to Disneyland, and so I visited, Tomorrowland and the House of the Future made of plastic. The Chematron that Monsanto also funded. These are really fascinating cultural artifacts that demonstrate how strong the advertising campaign was to sell us on wearing garbage.
Right.